friendship. Scientists tell us that friendship is one of the earliest things that we begin to recognize and filter through as we are growing. They say that you begin to notice and understand friendships around 9 months old. That a 9-month-old begins kind of seeing and interacting with the world in a way that says, hey, there are preferred people in our lives. And while, of course, the language is not there to support it, but they can begin to see the interaction and the way that it happens and why that there is a different interaction between some sets of people and other sets of people. They can sense it, they can feel it, they pick up on it. And ultimately, by the age of 4, we are now equipped to where we can make our own friends or decide to not be friends with someone. Now, that's on average. Obviously, there are some people that get at it a little quicker, maybe some a little later, but by the age of 4, that's where it's at. You now have that ability to make some friends and to decide whether or not you want to be friends with someone. Now, when I think through that immediately when I was reading this study, I was like, man, what was I doing when I was 4, and was I making friends? And I was in pre-K. I was a little pre-K in East Point, Georgia, and I was there, and I was playing Ninja Turtles. That's what I was doing when I was 4, every day at recess. Ninja Turtles was the way to go, and we didn't do anything else. We did not take Ninja Turtle Day off because there was always crime that we had to get on top of, you know what I'm saying? And so I had friends. I invited my friends into my Ninja Turtle gang. I was Michelangelo, obviously. That's who I was. Matthew, he was a little wild and crazy. He liked pizza, and so he was Raphael. Paul was Donatello. Michael was Leonardo. And we had 2 girls that we allowed to play in our little circle of friends, Heather and Leslie. And they took turns either being April, who was the news reporter, or Splinter, our sensei. So I don't know if it was good for the girls to change off being the rat, but that's just the way it fell, okay? That's the way the lots fell. We had this jungle gym that we would get up on top of, and we could walk across, like there was these, like a ladder, but it was a vertical ladder. What was it called? Monkey bars, thank you. So they had these monkey bars that you could get up on top of, and it had a pole that came off the monkey bars, and so you could jump off the monkey bars onto the pole and slide it all the way down. I would walk across those monkey bars, no hands, just walking right across this ladder. I was 20 feet off the ground, you know what I'm saying? 20 feet off, and people could care less if kids got hurt. They just didn't care. They're like, hey, as long as you're playing, you're developing, and that's what's important, you know, but now you can't even play. So, that's what I would do. I would walk across, and I would watch the crime happen below, and I would jump off those monkey bars, and I would Ninja Turtle into that bad boy, and I would make sure that crime had no place in our jurisdiction. Now, I went back to this playground about 15, 20 years ago. Turns out those monkey bars are only about 6 foot off the ground. They weren't quite 20 like I remembered. You know what I'm saying? Like I thought we were way up there, man. I could see everything. Not so much. I remember my friends. I remember the first guy who I didn't want to be my friend. His name was Ben R. I know you're wondering, what kind of name is Ben R? That's what I was wondering too. You know, Ben R. I don't think that was his real name. That's just what he told us to call him. That's what he told the teachers to call him. It was just B-E-N-R. Ben R. That was it. I remember the reason I didn't like him is because until he got to my school, I was the best at everything. I ran the fastest, threw the farthest. I was dominant, and he showed up, and all of a sudden, I started losing some races. And I was like, what in the world? This guy he's taking PEDs. You know what I'm saying? That's it. There's no chance. How in the world could I possibly be slower than another human being on this planet? There's just no way. Surely this is cheating. And so I hated him. I couldn't stand him. I didn't like that. Ben R. loved wrestling. He liked all the wrestling stuff, and so he'd want to wrestle. I'm like, nah, bro, why don't we play kickball or something? Why don't we play basketball so I can school you? He knew all these wrestling moves. He was DDTing people on the mats. It was unreal. Off the top rope, coming in with the elbow. Ben R. was my arch enemy. The survey says that 67% of Americans say they still have a friend from their childhood. 67%. I'm curious. I did this with the 9 o'clock. I'm curious here. Just if you would, just indulge me. If you still have a friend that you know from your childhood that you're still connected with in some way, would you raise your hand? Oh, my gosh. Wow. That's unbelievable. Survey was wrong, okay? 97%. You know what I'm saying? Good gracious alive. Friends are good. Friends are so good, right? We want friends. Friends are good. There's a biblical case for friendship, and I want to walk through it real quick with you. The thing is if you've grown up in the church or had really any any long-term time in the church, as soon as I start reading this, I'm like, I know what you're talking. In fact, some of you might already be like, I know exactly what he's about to read, right? But just bear with me for a second, because I want to read these, and I just want to point out a couple obvious things, and then I want to tweak it a little bit. I just want to tweak and challenge you a little bit to see if there's, well, we'll get there. It starts in a book called Ecclesiastes, chapter 4, and the author of Ecclesiastes says this: two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. All right, so he's about to make a case. He's going to give us 4 reasons that companionship, friendship, partnership is important. And the first one he says is, hey, let me just hit you where it hurts the most. In your pocketbook, in your wallet, if you want to have more resources, if you want to have more return for what you got, then 2 are better than 1. If you're going to have a partner jump in and work extremely hard with you, like nose to the grindstone, let's get after it. If you're going to do that, then it just makes sense, right? So find you somebody who's going to get after it with you, because 2 are better than 1. You accomplish more together, in other words. Verse 10, if either of them falls down, one can help the other up, but pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Man, of course, that makes sense. Yeah, he's saying, hey, people are going to make mistakes. You're going to trip up sometimes. And when you trip up and you fall and you're face down in the dirt, man, isn't it good to have somebody who's there that says, hey, come on, get up. Because you know what I'm talking about. It's like good friends, when you fall on your face, I mean, of course, they laugh at first. You know, they're like, oh, that's the greatest thing I've seen. But then they actually do care if you're hurt, you know, most of the time, you know. And so they check on you, and they're like, hey, come on, get up. Whereas if we were to fall by ourselves, we might just lay there for a minute, right? If we fall all by ourselves and we're like and say, I'm just going to lay here. I'm just going to give me a minute. I'm just going to, and we're not talking to anybody but ourselves. Like, I'm just going to drink this in for a second. I'm going to soak this up. But our friend's like, no, come on, get out of the dirt, you know? Now, the second part of that, though, he says, hey, if either of you fall down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. When I hear that, I hear Mr. T reading this. Pity the fool. I pity the fool. That's what I'm thinking. I pity the fool who falls and has no one to help them up. What does that mean, pity? Is it good to pity? Obviously, we don't like pity parties. Is it bad when you pity yourself, but good when we pity someone else? Does pity lead to empathy? In other words, what we're asking is, if we find someone who doesn't have a friend that would help them when they've fallen, what should that lead us to do? Where should our mind go? Should it be pity? Should it be empathy? I'll be honest, there's sometimes in my world, in my life, where if I see someone has fallen and they're all by themselves, I'm like, well, they probably deserved it. You know, you shouldn't have been so nasty to all the people who probably wanted to be your friend. And now in a time, sometimes that's where my mind goes. That's interesting, though, this choice of language. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Verse 11, also, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And so the picture is like, hey, we're traveling, right? We're traveling. It's nighttime. It's gotten cold. And man, it'd be great. So you can either choose, like, I'm gonna get up against this cold rock, or, man, you got somebody else you can get pretty close to. But, hey, let's just get through the night, you know? Let's get through the night. It's cold. The sun's coming up, but let's get through the night together, right? Let's just make it through the night. In other words, hey, life is hard sometimes, right? Like, life is just hard sometimes. And it would be great if we had someone help us survive the night. Because life is hard. Verse 12. Though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. So the world is cruel and can be vicious at times. And so isn't it great that we've got someone who can fight a battle with us? Isn't it great that we've got someone who's kind of watching our backs from time to time? The author even goes so far to say, hey, it'd be great if you had a connection, if you had a friend, if you had someone to kind of be a partner with, but the truth is, a cord of 3 strands, that's even better. So 2, fantastic. 3? Now we're cooking with gas. Let's go. Now we're getting somewhere. Now, truth is, I actually didn't have to read you the Bible for any of you to know any of those truths, did I? That makes sense. Yeah, of course. If you got two people working equally as hard, busting their tails, of course there's a greater return. Duh. If you are all alone, traveling, middle of the night, and you're cold, everybody knows. Let's huddle up. Let's make it through the night. Sun's coming up. Let's make it through the night. Of course, if somebody comes to attack me, I'd rather have a partner let's throw down with, I don't want to do this by myself. I mean, I will, but if I got to. But it'd be great if I had some help, All this stuff right here, this is just, yeah, of course, this makes sense. This is what friends are, right? There's a recent survey about friendship in America. There's some hope. There's some hope here. Only 12% of people stated that they had zero friends. Only 12% of Americans said that I got nobody, right? Now, that's a pretty big number in terms of overall, like individual people. Those people matter. Like 12% of 300-something million. That's a lot of people. But relatively speaking, it's like, okay, so 12% is like, okay, we could actually try to figure out some programs and we could do some teaching and maybe some education for 12% and kind of shrink that number. I think that's doable. I think that's a doable thing. 37% of Americans said they got between 1 and 3 friends, 37%. 51% said they had 4 or more friends. And so when we begin doing the math, like this is solid. So 12%, 0. But that means 88% of everyone in the country has at least one friend. Like that's good. That's great news. 88% at least got one friend. The problem is 36% of Americans have reported that they experience serious loneliness. That's interesting. Yeah. 88% of people got friends. But 36% of people say they experience serious loneliness. 51% of mothers with young children say that they experience serious loneliness. Here's another crazy one. 61% of young people, that's age 18 to 25, say that frequently or almost all the time they feel lonely. Now, 2 things I want to point out. Number 1, young people are now only considered 18 to 25. So if you're over 25, you are not young people. I just want to make sure that we're clear on that, okay? 26 and above, it's over. See? In fact, this is a quote from the study. About half of lonely young adults in our survey reported that no one in the past few weeks had taken more than just a few minutes to ask how they are doing in a way that made them feel like that person genuinely cared. I just want to, every once in a while we have these moments where I need to push time out. Like we're just going to do like the Zach Morris timeout where we're just going to freeze things. I'm going to come back to the message in a second, but I just want to push a timeout. I want to talk about this for a second. These are 18 to 25-year-olds, right? Now, I promise you, when you look at that statistic, right, 60-something, what did I say? 61% are saying, hey, I'm experiencing crazy loneliness, 61%. I guarantee you, an enormous, overwhelming majority of that 61% has social media. I promise. It's probably close to 100%. Which means that regularly they're getting feedback from people, likes, comments, views, all those things. So what does this tell us? If they're getting constant feedback and affirmation from their friends or from their acquaintances, yet they still feel lonely, what does that tell us? It's telling us that the social media, that digital connection isn't as powerful as in your face, one-on-one human connection. that there's something different about it. That there's something a little more significant about actually having a sit down with somebody or a legitimate conversation over the phone. Like there's something different about that than just a simple digital interaction. And that the digital interaction isn't doing internally what maybe it was even doing 10 years ago. Where people were feeling like, man, I feel on top of the world because have you seen how many people like my post? Like, I'm having a good day. Now, the same number of people are liking the post, and it's not a good day anymore because the fuel in terms of that type of interaction just doesn't last. It just doesn't last as long. And it's not as substantive. It's alarming to me. Time back in. A friend is defined as this: a person whom one knows and with whom one has a bond of mutual affection. A person whom one knows and with whom one has a bond of mutual affection. So those are easy, right? Friends are easy. We just need like a water cooler and we can make a friend, right? Mutual bond. We just need a water cooler somewhere, and we can go hang out at the water cooler or the coffee pot or whatever the thing is, right? I know some of y'all don't even have those anymore because y'all all working like hybrid from home, and you don't even go to the office, right? But used to, people went, and there was a water cooler, and you would go talk about it. And you would just talk about nonsense like the Braves or sports or the Falcons. Nobody talks about the Falcons, but you know what I'm talking about. Like you talk about things. If you're a guy, I'm just talking from my perspective, you know? And we would talk about it. And we would just talk about whatever. Or, you know what the other thing is? We talk about the weather. Talk about the weather. Like, man, golly, it's windy outside. It ain't too cold, but it's the wind that does it. You know what I'm saying? That's what we would say. Or goodness, is it ever going to stop raining? And all of a sudden, it's like, man, it's been raining a lot at my house too. Who would have thought? We live in the same city. It's crazy, isn't it? And now we got a mutual bond, and me and you are friends. You know what I'm saying? Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. You remember the 95 World Series? None of the young people do, that's for sure. Lame. You remember the 95 World Series? Where were you? This is what I was. That's right. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo! I got one, right? Like, where were you on that night? Or where were you when Sid slid in 92? This is what I was doing. All of a sudden, we got friends, you know what I'm saying? We got a mutual bond. And now we know each other, and we are connected. We got friends. We got friends. But if 88% of people got friends, why in the world are so many people still lonely? I mean, isn't that what loneliness is? The absence of people? Loneliness is just you all by yourself. But if you got friends, how are you all by yourself? And 88% of America got at least one of them. The overwhelming majority's got more than one. It's got four or more. Well, I think it's because there's actually something more than friendship. I want to read something to you in an attempt to start building a case that what you really need isn't friends. There's a church planter, his name is Paul. He's writing to a group of followers of Jesus that are friends. They're in this group together, and they're at church, and they're trying to change their community. And it's not a huge, enormous thing. It's growing, but it's not crazy huge, you know. He's writing this letter, and he's about to talk about how he wants them to treat one another, and he's not using leverage as, hey, my name is Paul, and I'm the church planter, and I'm an apostle, right? Big biblical word for I got some authority. He's saying, hey, I'm not going to use that. What I'm going to say is I want to point to Jesus, and because of the legitimacy of Jesus, I want to ask you then to treat one another in a specific way. I want you to look at one another in a very specific way because of who Jesus is. And so that's what he's saying here. We'll pick up in his letter to the Philippian church in chapter 2, 1 and 2. He says this: therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ. He said, hey, this is why. Not if you trust me, not if you think I'm great, not if you think I'm a good speaker, but if you've been encouraged at all from being united with Jesus, comma, if you have any comfort from his love, any comfort at all, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, right? He's saying, hey, I want to point to Jesus. If you've experienced any of these things because of Jesus, I want you to do what I'm about to ask you to do. If you haven't, I got no authority to ask you. But if you've experienced those things, I want to ask you to do this. He says this, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Here's the important part. Like-minded, same love, one in spirit and mind. Like-minded, same love, one in spirit and mind. Now, I know that's not the definition of friend, but honestly, isn't that actually what we're looking for? Aren't we looking for people in our lives that are like-minded, the same love, one in spirit and in mind? Now, for sure, let me clarify. I'm not saying that we are looking for people who think exactly like us, right? I'm not saying that, hey, in my friend circle, you either are a Braves fan and say go Dogs, or you are not allowed to be a part of this, right? I'm not saying that kind of like-minded. I'm saying, hey, there's a depth to our like-mindedness that we're looking for. And it's not the superficial, hey, I want to make sure that you like the beach and not the mountains kind of friendship, right? Like, we're not looking at those things. This is deeper than that. He's saying, hey, let's draw on who you are connected to Jesus. And if that is legit, this is the way relationships ought to happen. Make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. It wasn't just the church planter Paul that talks like this, though. There's a guy that we would refer to now as a church father. A church father is someone who came after that first century where Jesus and his close followers were there, and they kind of pick up the baton and they continue running forward with it. And they have written a lot about their experiences, even down to what a Sunday or first of the week gathering would look like. We've got a lot of information on that. And they've just written a plethora of their experiences and their thoughts on the words of Jesus and some of the Bible as it was being put together in their time. There is one in particular, his name is Justin Martyr, and he was around 100, right around 100 AD to 165. He ended up losing his life. He was executed in Rome. He said this about friendship: though you should name infinite treasures, none of them is comparable to a genuine friend. And first, let us speak of the great delight of friendship itself. A friend rejoices at seeing his friend, and his heart expands with joy. He is tied to him with a union of soul that affords unspeakable pleasure. I speak of genuine friends, men of one soul, who would even die for each other, who love each other fervently. Now, Justin would know what real legitimate relationship looks like. He was executed for his faith, and he wasn't executed alone. There was a little group of them, friends of one soul and one mind, that they decided we will attack the day together. And it cost them their life ultimately, you know. It wasn't just church fathers and this church planter, though, that talks about this. Jesus actually mentions something really similar. In John 15:13, Jesus says this: greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Now, there's a difference in these friendships and the friendships we were describing earlier. I mean, look, I get it. Like, every once in a while, there's some adrenaline heroes. Like, I get it. For those of you who are first responders and you put your life on the line and that's your job, that's what you're calling. So we're not talking about that kind of mentality. We're talking about just the average Joe. We're like sitting here and like, man, you like the Braves? I like the Braves. One of the two of you have to die. Well, I'm not letting him die. I'm going to die. It's like, no, I've been a Braves fan longer. Kill him first. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're not that involved with each other where we're about to give our life for a stranger just because we like the Braves together, you know? That's not what's happening in our friendships. In the 80% of people who say they've got a friend, 36% which are still lonely, those kind of friends are not dying for one another. They're not one soul, one mind kind of friends. They're just, hey, we both like the same team. You know, we both like to play golf. We both fill in the blank. But because that's the extent of it, I'm still lonely. You see, I don't think we're actually looking for friendship at all. I think we're searching for a biblical word that we don't use all that often. It's got a lot of baggage, to be honest with you. Fellowship. Fellowship. We're great at friends. We are not so great at fellowship. Now, I don't like the word fellowship, I'll be honest with you, because when I grew up in a very traditional church. We had a thing called the fellowship hall, right? Y'all laughing because y'all had one too. You know what I'm saying? Now, in the fellowship hall, what happened was we had this little place where all of a sudden we would start doing some events in this fellowship hall. And most of the time, we would just eat somebody else's nasty casserole. That's what we would do. And then we called that fellowshipping. That's what we would do. Now, here's the deal. When I was growing up, no matter what was put on my plate in the fellowship hall, I was about to eat it. I could not take a bite of some raw spinach, nasty, gross, nasty, rotten stuff that's been sitting in the car for 6 hours, and they decided to bring it in. If I took a bite of it, it's going down. You know what I'm saying? I cannot spit it out in the fellowship hall. No siree. Not going to happen. We would have these events in this fellowship hall. Every once in a while, people could rent it out. They could rent it out for birthday parties and retirement parties and all kind of stuff, right? Because, and here's the thing, the heart behind it was great. They're like, man, look at all these people we got sitting in these chairs. But the truth is, y'all can't do the friendship stuff we need to do sitting in rows. And so what do? We got to create another space that will hold the same amount of people just without chairs and seats in them. At the time, it was pews, right? We got to get rid of this because we got to have places for people to sit face to face and eat the casserole. And so we had to build this other thing so that we could clear the space and we could do things in it. Because the church has always known there's got to be something more than just sitting staring at a guy talk for 30 minutes, right? There's got to be something more than that, right? And so we got to have some fellowship. So we'll make a fellowship hall and we'll do the dinner things. And that's what we'll do. Now, the problem is that it convinced Christians that the place that fellowship took place was at the fellowship hall. That made sense. The heart behind it was great. The product that it produced just wasn't all that great. When I hear the word fellowship, it just doesn't resonate with me. But when I begin to study the word fellowship, it's like, man, there's something special to this word. Something special to this word. In fact, when we get a description of the first century church, an incredibly healthy church, they use this word. It says this: they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Devoted. Fellowship. Here's a good definition of fellowship: a friendship with a depth of common calling and inheritance. That's a good definition for fellowship. A friendship with a depth of common calling and inheritance. Let's make sure we get these two things right? Calling and inheritance. And so saying, hey, you know what we do is we take these relationships that are normal, right? Go Braves. How about the weather? We take them a level deeper than that and says, hey, we're going to attack the world together because not only do we have some surface level common things, whatever those might be, but there's this calling and inheritance that takes it to an even deeper level. When we look through the church planner's expectations, it says, hey, if you have any connection to Jesus, right, we're going to put Jesus on a pedestal, and if you have a connection to him, treat people this way, one mind, one spirit. When we look at that, when we look at Justin Martyr, it says, hey, friendship looks like this. Man, they are a joy to see one another. In fact, they rejoice inside and outside, so much that they would even give their life for one another. When we hear Jesus, there's no greater love than this, that one would lay down his life for a friend. When we look at that, it's like, man, what drives that? Calling and inheritance drives that. Calling and inheritance drives that. Yeah, what is this calling? Yeah, it's simple, right? It's the reality that Jesus is who he says he is, and that Jesus had a calling, and his calling was rescue. That's it. And Jesus tells us over and over again, the reason I'm here, guys, the reason I'm here is because you needed saving. That's my job. That's why I'm here. It's the reason I'm walking the planet. It's because you needed saving. Like that's how this whole thing got initiated. If you didn't need saving, I wouldn't have been here. This was not a part of the plan if things went perfect. But because you needed saving, here comes the rescue mission. And then Jesus turns around and says, hey, I want to give the calling that I've had in my life, and I want to extend it to every single person who follows after me. And so my calling becomes your calling. An urgency that says, hey, there's got to be there's a disconnect between people and God, and we've got to do something about it, and Jesus did. And so we've got to do something about raising awareness and providing opportunities for people to get that calling in our lives. That common calling gives a depth to our relationships unlike anything else in the world. But it's not just a calling here, it's an inheritance there. It's an understanding that we are co-heirs with Jesus Christ to the kingdom of God. Co-heirs. Not baby brother heirs or baby sister heirs, co-heirs. In other words, when God looks upon us, he's not seeing this dumbed down version of Jesus. When he looks at us, he sees his son Jesus. He sees a co-heir in his kingdom. And suddenly we begin to realize those kind of relationships, and we yearn for those kind of relationships that have that common calling and that common inheritance. Man, you can get depth there extremely quick. It doesn't happen if you put the calling and the inheritance, though, at the back of the line. Because you might be thinking, well, hold on. I've got friends that are Christians, and we still aren't that close of friends. Well, let me ask you, is the calling and inheritance at the front of the line for both of you? Or is it just like in the line somewhere? Or is it at the front of the line? In terms of the things that maybe you have conversations about, and the things that pull you together, and the things that you challenge one another on, are those your calling and your inheritance? Or are those just acknowledged but never talked about? Like, oh yeah, we go to church, that kind of thing, but we actually legitimately don't sit down and talk about our calling and our inheritance. Like, we don't do that. Who would do that? The kind of friends that give their lives for one another. Those kind of friends do that. The kind of friends where if you had one, you wouldn't be in the 36% of people who says, I got a friend, but I'm still lonely. Those kind of friends don't let that happen. The definition of loneliness is by yourself. Those kind of friends who have calling and inheritance, first thing, you're not going weeks without someone having a genuine conversation with you, saying, hey, how are you doing? In a genuine way that allows you to know, man, you actually, this isn't just like I got nothing else to talk about question. This is a real question. You're actually interested in my answer. And then when I answer, you're actually going to think about, is there any action on this for you? That's a completely different situation than just, hey man, how you doing? Good? Great. Family good? Oh, so good. Spring training's next week. I know. Wish I could go. Stuck here in the weather. The wind is the wind. You know? It's different. It's different. You see, we go back to the beginning. Those 4 little pieces we read out of Ecclesiastes. You remember the one where you fall down, someone can pick you up? You know, the kind of friends I'm talking about are the kind of friends that when you fall and you fall into the gravel and you face plant so hard that you've got gravel and grit and dirt in your teeth, and you just can't get it out of your mouth. It's those kind of friends that for sure are going to help you up. But you know what those kind of friends do sometimes? They actually just lay down in the dirt with you. And they're like, hey, you know what? I'm not here to be transactional. I'll lay here until you're ready to get up, and I'm going to help you get up. That's different. It's different. And the kind of friend that the Bible's talking about is not someone who you just happen to be traveling with, and oh man, it's cold, and it's nighttime, right? That's not what they're talking about. No, the picture I want you to have is you've got to go through a night, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and it's going to be cold. There's going to be a night coming, and honestly, the truth is hey, when we huddle together because it's cold at night, we're not doing it because it's the greatest place of warmth. No, the greatest place of warmth is the sun, and the sun is coming up. But I got to get you through the night. We just got to get through the night. The sun is the best place that we're going to get warmth, that we're going to feel like, man, we can get through this. And the sun is coming up, but I need someone just to get me through the night. And the kind of friend we're talking about has a house that is heated and a bed that is comfy and blankets that are snuggly and all the other things, but they know you've got to walk through the night, and they decide, I'm going to leave my house and I'm going to go walk with you through the night. I'm going to intentionally choose. I'll see you later, house. I'll be back. I know you're not going anywhere. This friend, I would just invite him to my house if I could, but they've actually got to walk through this night. They don't have another choice. They don't have another option. It's a consequence of their behavior, or it's something they couldn't control that is now a part of their life. Night is coming for them, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I'm going to leave my house, and I'm going to go snuggle with them to help them get to where the sun comes up. That's different. That is not how the Braves friends. And people don't make that decision and choice over and over again unless there's a common calling and a common inheritance. Then suddenly, when the calling and the inheritance make sense, and the calling and inheritance is at the forefront of that relationship, it's just what you do. It's just what you do. There are three major pistons that make our foundation church engine run. The first one you're sitting in right now, a catalytic weekend experience. So our goal each and every weekend is for you to leave, hopefully in a catalyzed way, to do or think something new, right? So if you just come and you're like, man, cool, got my church in. If you don't leave and your mind isn't, this is what I need to be thinking through, this is what I probably ought to attack this week, right? If there's no catalytic moment for you, then I'm not doing my job, our team's not doing our job. Every single week, that's what we aim for, a catalytic weekend experience for everybody. The second thing, surrendered living. So that's one piston, catalytic weekend experience. Second one, surrendered living. So we want to teach people and provide opportunities for people to leverage who they are to live a generous and open-handed lifestyle that reflects the nature of Jesus. So that you are agile enough and prepared enough to step in when people need your help. That you would be selfless, right? That you would surrender what you have for the good of our community. And that could be time, it could be an ability, it could be physical resources, it could be finances. And a well-rounded, surrendered life, it's all of those things. So that's the second part. That's why we do so much service in our community. So we have a catalytic weekend experience. We thrive and teach in surrendered living. And here's the third one, though. This is the one we're talking about today. Life-changing relationships. And if we can get those three things pumping at an incredible rate in an engine, in sync with one another, that's when our church continues, that's why our church continues to grow over and over and over again. Year after year, just adds and adds and adds to it. Now the third one, this is important though, is that we are not a fellowship hall church, right? No, we simply provide opportunities for you to make these connections. I can't play matchmaker for all of you, for you to figure out who's my person that's going to take a bullet for me. I can't do that. It just doesn't work. I can't say, Hannah, meet Molly, right? Now the two of y'all are now fantastically, and y'all will bullet each other, right? No, not each other, but you know what I'm saying, right? It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way at all. No, but what we do is we provide opportunities for you to make connections that have the potential to turn into that. One of the examples is for you ladies, the Party of 8. It's coming up. Now, Party of 8, if you only see these ladies once every quarter when we do this Party of 8 thing, that's not a life-changing relationship. But Party of 8 isn't meant to be life-changing. It's meant to be an opportunity for you to meet someone that could be life-changing. Now, it might not work every time. In fact, it doesn't. I'm just being honest, it doesn't. But we want to continue to provide opportunities over and over again because we believe that you need that. Because we read it here. You need legitimate fellowship on calling and inheritance. And so we try to provide those opportunities for you to discover them. We're getting ready to do groups. Group sign-ups start next week. Groups are that. It's an opportunity for you to meet new people and maybe form a relationship that becomes life-changing. Now, we do groups all the time. You know, I mean, we do groups twice a year. Spring semester, fall semester. We don't expect for you to find a life-changing relationship every single time. For those of you who have been here for 4 years, you would have now like a dozen. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not how it works, right? We don't manufacture friendship. We manufacture opportunities for discovery. The truth is, the 12% of people that said they did not have a friend, every one of us knows that's a lie. Because the truth is, everyone has at least one friend, even if that one friend is loneliness. Can't you smell loneliness when it's coming? Can't you hear loneliness's voice? Don't you know what it feels like when loneliness walks into the room? Haven't you woken up in the middle of the night and seen loneliness hovering over you? Haven't you curled up in a blanket and a chair right next to loneliness? Haven't you drank your coffee with loneliness? Haven't you stood in the mirror and brushed your teeth and saw loneliness staring right back at you? The thing is, we shouldn't be friends with loneliness. We shouldn't have a common calling and inheritance with loneliness. You and me both. Truth is, we don't need friends. We need fellowship. Friends are easy. Look at the weather app before you go talk to people. Find out if the Braves won. Friends are easy. Fellowship. That's where it's at.